The dust swirled along Main Street as Rebecca Greenfield stepped down from the stagecoach, her emerald eyes surveying the rugged frontier town of Silverdale with a mixture of trepidation and determination. The year was 1878, and the Arizona Territory was no place for a city woman, at least that's what everyone said. But Rebecca had not traveled 2,000 miles to turn back now, even as the whispers began around her. "Another eastern dove come to roost," muttered an old-timer, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "Won't last a month in this heat." Rebecca straightened her back, adjusted her travel-worn hat, and lifted her carpetbag with a strength that belied her slender frame. At 24, she had buried her parents, sold their Boston bookshop, and decided that a new life awaited her in the West. The teaching position advertised in Silverdale had been her beacon, her chance to forge a path entirely her own. As she walked toward the town's only hotel, the sound of hoofbeats drew her attention. A tall man on horseback approached, his worn leather hat pulled low against the relentless sun. His horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, came to a stop directly in front of her. "Madam," he said simply, tipping his hat. His eyes were the color of a summer sky, contrasting sharply with his sun-bronzed skin. "You must be the new schoolteacher." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "And how would you know that, sir?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Not many women arrive alone in Silverdale wearing clothes that fine, carrying books rather than a shotgun." He nodded toward her carpetbag, where the corner of a volume peeked out. "Besides, whole town's been talking about you coming." "Indeed, and what precisely have they been saying?" She challenged, already suspecting the answer. The man swung down from his horse with practiced ease, standing a respectful distance away. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a lean strength born of hard work rather than leisure. "Wyatt Blackburn," he introduced himself, extending a calloused hand. "Town marshal and occasional cattle driver, and they've been saying what they always say about newcomers, especially women from back east." "That I won't last the month," Rebecca suggested wryly, accepting his handshake. His grip was firm but gentle. Wyatt's eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "They said you wouldn't last. I smiled and told them she'll last as long as I do." The unexpected vote of confidence caught Rebecca off guard. "You seem very sure of a woman you've just met, Marshal Blackburn." "I've learned to recognize grit when I see it," he replied, taking her carpetbag despite her protest. "And anyone who travels alone across the country to teach children in a place they've never been has grit in spades." He gestured toward the modest two-story building across the street. "The Silver Dollar's the only hotel in town. Mrs. Wilson runs it. She's tough but fair. I'll walk you there." "I can manage on my own," Rebecca insisted, though the prospect of navigating the unfamiliar town alone was daunting. "No doubt you can," Wyatt agreed easily. "But a gentleman offers assistance not because a lady needs it, but because it's the right thing to do." Something about his straightforward manner disarmed her. "Very well, Marshal, lead the way." As they crossed the dusty street, Rebecca felt the stares of townspeople, some curious, others openly skeptical. A group of men outside the saloon nudged each other, watching her progress with undisguised interest. "Don't mind them," Wyatt said quietly. "New faces are rare enough to be entertainment around here. Particularly female faces, I imagine," Rebecca observed. Wyatt's expression remained neutral. "There are decent women in Silverdale, wives, mothers, shopkeepers. Not as many as men, true enough, but the ones here have earned respect." He glanced at her. "As will you, given time." The lobby of the Silver Dollar Hotel was modestly furnished but clean, with a polished wooden counter and a potted plant that somehow survived despite the harsh climate. A stern-faced woman with iron-gray hair pinned in a tight bun looked up from her ledger as they entered. "Mrs. Wilson," Wyatt said cordially, "may I present Miss Rebecca Greenfield, Silverdale's new schoolteacher." The older woman assessed Rebecca with shrewd eyes. HMPH, expected someone older. Her gaze softened slightly. "But I suppose youth has its advantages out here. Rooms ready. $2 a week, meals included." "Thank you," Rebecca said, reaching for her purse. "First week's already paid," Mrs. Wilson said, sliding a key across the counter. School board took care of it. Wyatt set Rebecca's bag down. The schoolhouse is just 2 streets over. Classes don't start until Monday, so you have 3 days to settle in. Rebecca nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was after the long journey. Thank you for your assistance, Marshal. Wyatt, he corrected. Everyone just calls me Wyatt. He tipped his hat again. If you need anything, my office is across from the general store. With a nod to Mrs. Wilson, he turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and there's a town social Saturday evening at the church. Good way to meet folks. After he departed, Mrs. Wilson led Rebecca to a small but neat room on the 2nd floor. Bathrooms down the hall, waters heated twice daily, meals at 7, noon, and 6. She paused at the door. The marshal's right, you know, town social would be good for you. Rebecca set her bag on the bed. Do you think I won't last here either, Mrs. Wilson? The older woman's expression softened slightly. I came here 20 years ago as a new bride. Everyone gave us 6 months before we'd pack up for civilization. A faint smile touched her lips. My Harold's been buried out back of the church these 12 years, and I'm still here. I'm sorry for your loss, Rebecca said softly. Mrs. Wilson shrugged. Life in the West takes as much as it gives, but it's a life worth living if you've got the backbone for it. She studied Rebecca. The marshal doesn't usually take such an interest in newcomers. Interesting. Before Rebecca could respond, Mrs. Wilson departed, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She unpacked her few possessions, placing her cherished books on the small bedside table. Among them was a volume of poetry her father had given her, inscribed with his belief in her strength. Standing at the window, Rebecca looked out at the frontier town that would be her home. Dust, heat, and uncertainty stretched before her, yet something stirred in her chest, a sense of possibility she hadn't felt since her parents' passing. Perhaps Marshal Blackburn was right. Perhaps she would last after all. The next morning, Rebecca rose early, determined to familiarize herself with Silverdale and her new workplace. After a hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, and biscuits served by Mrs. Wilson, she set out toward the schoolhouse. The morning air was cool, a blessing before the sun climbed higher. Silverdale was larger than it had appeared upon her arrival, with a main street boasting a general store, bank, telegraph office, 2 saloons, a small church, and various other businesses. Side streets revealed modest homes, many with small gardens struggling against the arid climate. The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building painted white, with a bell tower and several windows allowing light to enter. When Rebecca tried the door, she found it unlocked. Inside, rows of wooden desks faced a larger teacher's desk at the front. A blackboard spanned the wall, and bookshelves woefully understocked lined another wall. A pot-bellied stove stood in the corner for winter heating. It's not much, but it serves its purpose, came a voice from behind her. Rebecca turned to find an elderly man with spectacles perched on his nose, leaning on a walking stick. Mr. Holloway, he introduced himself, extending a gnarled hand. President of the school board and former teacher myself, until these old bones protested too much. Rebecca Greenfield, she replied, shaking his hand. I'm grateful for the opportunity. 26 students enrolled, Mr. Holloway informed her, ages 6 to 16. Some can only attend when farm work permits. He gestured to the bookshelves. Resources are limited, I'm afraid. Rebecca nodded, already forming plans. I brought some books with me, and I've written to former colleagues in Boston who might contribute more. Mr. Holloway studied her curiously. Marshal Blackburn spoke highly of you at the board meeting when we were considering applicants. Said your letter showed uncommon intelligence and determination. He chuckled. Not that Wyatt uses such fancy words himself, mind you. Surprised that the marshal had influenced her hiring, Rebecca asked. The marshal was involved in selecting the new teacher. Wyatt's more than just our lawman. Town council member volunteers with the church, helps organize community events. Man wears many hats besides that dusty Stetson of his. Mr. Holloway shuffled toward the door. School supplies are in that cabinet. Keys are yours. He placed a small ring on the desk. Any questions? I'm at the general store most mornings. After he left, Rebecca examined the supplies, chalk, slates, primers, a few worn textbooks. She spent the morning cleaning, organizing, and making lists of needed items. By midday, she'd formulated lesson plans for various age groups and skill levels. As she stepped outside to lock up, she noticed a small figure watching her from behind a nearby tree. A girl of perhaps 7 or 8 with dark braids and a faded calico dress ducked further into hiding when spotted. "Hello there," Rebecca called gently. "Would you like to see the schoolhouse?" After a moment's hesitation, the girl emerged, approaching cautiously. "Are you really the new teacher?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am. My name is Miss Greenfield, and who might you be?" "Sarah Wilkins," the girl replied, fidgeting with her dress. "Pa says I can come to school this year if I finish my chores." Rebecca smiled warmly. "I'm very glad to hear that, Sarah. Would you like to see where you'll be sitting?" The girl nodded eagerly, and Rebecca reopened the schoolhouse, showing her the desks and explaining how learning would proceed. Sarah's eyes widened at the prospect of books and reading. "Have you ever attended school before?" Rebecca asked. Sarah shook her head. "Ma taught me some letters before she passed. Pa tries, but he's busy with the farm." Rebecca's heart constricted. "Well, we shall remedy that straight away. Would you like to learn a letter now?" For the next half hour, Rebecca taught Sarah the letter S for her name, watching the girl's face light up with accomplishment as she traced it on a slate. Their lesson was interrupted by the town clock striking 1. "Oh," Sarah exclaimed, "I have to get home or Pa will worry." "Of course," Rebecca said, "but you may keep the slate to practice. I'll see you Monday morning." Sarah's smile was like sunshine as she carefully tucked the slate under her arm and scampered away. Rebecca locked the schoolhouse, her heart fuller than it had been in months. This moment of connection, of sharing knowledge, was why she had come west. As she turned toward the hotel for midday meal, she nearly collided with Wyatt Blackburn. "Careful there," he said, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. His touch was brief but sent an unexpected warmth through her arm. "Marshal," she acknowledged, stepping back. "I've just been acquainting myself with the schoolhouse." "And picking up students already, I see," he observed with a nod towards Sarah's retreating figure. "Sarah Wilkins is a good kid. Father's a hard-working man who's had a rough go since his wife died 2 winters back." "She seems bright and eager to learn," Rebecca said. Wyatt's expression softened. "Most kids around here are hungry for education, just haven't had anyone consistent to provide it." He fell into step beside her as they walked toward the hotel. "Our last teacher lasted 4 months before deciding Wyoming offered better prospects, mainly a wealthy rancher looking for a wife." "I assure you, I have no such aspirations," Rebecca stated firmly. Wyatt's laugh was warm and genuine. "Didn't imagine you did, Miss Greenfield. You strike me as a woman with her own mind." They had reached the hotel's porch when Rebecca paused. "Mr. Holloway mentioned you spoke in favor of my application. May I ask why, when you knew nothing about me?" Wyatt considered her question thoughtfully. "Your letter was different from the others. No talk of civilizing the poor frontier children or bringing Eastern refinement to the savage West." His blue eyes held hers. "You wrote about believing every child deserves knowledge, regardless of circumstances. About books being windows to worlds beyond one's own. Sounded like someone who might understand Silverdale, given time." Rebecca was momentarily speechless, surprised he had paid such close attention to her words. "Besides," he added with a hint of mischief, "your penmanship was far better than the other applicants. Figure that counts for something in a teacher." Despite herself, Rebecca laughed. "Indeed it does, Marshal, indeed it does." "Remember," he said as he tipped his hat, "town social tomorrow evening. 7 o'clock at the church. Nothing fancy, just music, dancing, and enough food to feed an army." "I'll consider it," Rebecca replied, though she'd already decided to attend. She needed to meet the parents of her future students, and Wyatt was right, it was a good way to introduce herself to the community. "See that you do," he said with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Town's curious about the woman brave enough to take on our children." As he walked away, Rebecca found herself watching him longer than propriety dictated. There was something compelling about Marshal Wyatt Blackburn, a quiet strength, an unexpected depth beneath his frontier lawman exterior. That evening, after dinner, Rebecca sat in the hotel's small sitting room with her book. Several other guests were present. A traveling salesman, an elderly couple visiting their son's family, and a middle-aged woman who introduced herself as Martha Cooper, the wife of Silverdale's doctor. "So you're our new schoolteacher," Martha said, settling into the chair beside Rebecca's. "My boys will be in your class. James is 12 and Thomas is 9. Rebecca marked her place in her book. "I look forward to meeting them. They're good boys, though Thomas would rather be exploring than studying." Martha leaned closer. "I saw you speaking with Marshal Blackburn today. He's been kind enough to help me get oriented," Rebecca replied carefully, noting the interest in the other woman's eyes. Martha nodded approvingly. "Wyatt's a good man. Been our marshal for 5 years now. Came from Colorado with quite a reputation as a man who could handle trouble without unnecessary bloodshed." She lowered her voice. "Half the unmarried women in town have set their caps for him, but he keeps to himself mostly. Lost his wife and child to fever before coming here." Rebecca's heart constricted at this revelation. How terrible, indeed. He doesn't speak of it, but Mrs. Wilson says he still wears his wedding band on a chain around his neck. Martha sighed. "Some wounds never fully heal, I suppose. But Silverdale needs him, and I think the work gives him purpose." Their conversation shifted to other topics: the challenges of frontier life, the upcoming harvest festival, which families had children in school. By the time Rebecca retired to her room, her mind was filled with new information about her adopted community, and unbidden thoughts of a certain blue-eyed lawman with hidden depths of sorrow. Saturday dawned clear and hot. Rebecca spent the morning writing letters to former colleagues in Boston, requesting book donations for the school. After lunch, she visited the general store to purchase fabric for new curtains for the schoolhouse windows, finding herself drawn into conversation with the storekeeper's wife about suitable materials. By late afternoon, she found herself fretting over what to wear to the social. She had packed practically for her new life, bringing mostly sensible dresses appropriate for teaching. After much deliberation, she chose her best dress, a deep blue cotton with subtle lace trim at the collar and cuffs. It wasn't fashionable by Boston standards, but it was clean, well-made, and becoming. At 6:45, Rebecca made her way to the church, hearing music and laughter before she arrived. Lanterns hung from trees surrounding the churchyard, casting a warm glow over tables laden with food and the open area where couples already danced to the music of fiddles and a harmonica. She hesitated at the edge of the gathering, suddenly nervous. In Boston, she had attended literary society meetings and small dinner parties, but nothing like this community celebration where everyone seemed to know everyone else. "Miss Greenfield," a small voice called out, and Rebecca spotted Sarah Wilkins waving excitedly. Beside her stood a tall, thin man with the same dark hair as his daughter, looking tired but clean-shaven and dressed in his Sunday best. Relieved to see a familiar face, Rebecca approached them. "Good evening, Sarah. You look very pretty tonight." The girl beamed, twirling to show off her freshly pressed dress. "Pa ironed it special, Miss Greenfield," the man said, extending his hand. "John Wilkins, Sarah's talked of nothing but you and that slate since yesterday. She's a bright girl, Mr. Wilkins. I look forward to having her in class." Before long, Rebecca found herself introduced to a steady stream of parents and their children, many offering welcome and a few sizing her up with skeptical looks. Mrs. Wilson appeared with a plate of food and a glass of lemonade, pressing them into Rebecca's hands. "Can't have you wasting away before school even starts," the older woman said gruffly. "Eat." Rebecca gratefully accepted the food, realizing she was indeed hungry. She found a quiet spot at the edge of a table and observed the community at play. Young couples danced, children chased each other between the tables, and older folks sat in groups, sharing stories and laughter. "Not quite a Boston society ball, I imagine," came a familiar voice. Wyatt Blackburn stood beside her, looking transformed from his usual practical attire. He wore a clean white shirt, dark vest, and pants that, while simple, fit his tall frame well. His dark blonde hair was neatly combed, and his face freshly shaved, highlighting the strong line of his jaw. I find I prefer this, Rebecca admitted. There's an honesty to it, may I? He asked, indicating the empty space beside her. At her nod, he sat, his long legs stretched out before him. How are you finding Silverdale so far? Everyone has been welcoming for the most part, she answered. Though I sense some are reserving judgment until they see if I can actually teach their children, Wyatt nodded. Frontier folks tend to judge by actions, not words. Do right by their kids and you'll have their loyalty for life. And what about you, Marshal? Are you also reserving judgment? His blue eyes met hers directly. I made my judgment when I read your letter, Miss Greenfield. Haven't seen reason to change it yet. The music shifted to a slower tune and Wyatt stood, extending his hand. Would you do me the honor of a dance? Rebecca hesitated. I should warn you, I'm more familiar with formal ballroom dances than. Just follow my lead, he said with an encouraging smile. Nothing complicated about a simple waltz. She placed her hand in his, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach as his fingers closed gently around hers. He led her to the area where other couples danced, his other hand coming to rest respectfully at her waist as they began to move to the music. Despite his rugged appearance, Wyatt danced with surprising grace. Where did a frontier marshal learn to waltz? Rebecca asked. A shadow passed briefly over his face. My wife taught me, said every gentleman should know how to dance properly. Rebecca immediately regretted her question. I'm sorry, Mrs. Cooper mentioned, that is, I heard about your loss. His expression remained composed, but his eyes revealed deeper emotions. It was a long time ago. Catherine would have approved of you, I think. She was a schoolteacher, too, before we married. They danced in silence for a moment, Rebecca unsure what to say. Finally, she asked, what brought you to Silverdale after Colorado? Needed a fresh start, he said simply. Town needed a marshal who could keep order without turning Main Street into a shooting gallery every Saturday night. His hand shifted slightly at her waist, steady and warm. What about you? What brings a Boston bookseller's daughter to the Arizona territory? The same, I suppose, a fresh start. She met his gaze. After my parents died, there was nothing holding me there. I wanted to go somewhere I might make a difference. And have you found it? He asked quietly. Rebecca thought of Sarah's face lighting up as she learned to write her initial. I believe I have, she answered honestly. The music ended, but Wyatt didn't immediately release her. For a heartbeat, they stood close, something unspoken passing between them. Then he stepped back, proper distance restored. Thank you for the dance, Miss Greenfield. Rebecca, she said impulsively. If I'm to call you Wyatt, then you should call me Rebecca. A slow smile spread across his face. Rebecca, he repeated, as if testing how her name felt on his tongue. The moment was interrupted by a commotion near the church steps. A man's angry voice rose above the music, which quickly stuttered to a stop. Wyatt's posture changed instantly, the relaxed dancer replaced by the alert lawman. Excuse me, he said, already moving toward the disturbance. Rebecca followed at a distance, curious. A red-faced man swayed on his feet, clearly intoxicated. Before him stood Mr. Holloway and another older gentleman, both looking concerned. No place for your kind here, Jenkins, the unknown man was saying. This is a family gathering. Got as much right as anyone, the drunk man slurred. Just wanted to meet the new schoolmarm, heard she's a pretty piece. Wyatt stepped between them, his voice level but authoritative. That's enough, Frank. You know the rules about these socials. Aw, Marshal, just having some fun, Frank Jenkins protested, his bloodshot eyes trying to focus on Wyatt. Besides, everyone's wondering if she'll last longer than the last one. Betting pools already started at the saloon. A murmur ran through the gathered crowd. Rebecca felt heat rising to her cheeks, embarrassment mingling with indignation. Wyatt's voice remained steady but carried a note of steel. You've had enough fun for tonight. Go sleep it off. Or what? You'll lock me up for speaking the truth? Frank's belligerence was growing. We all know these Eastern women can't hack it out here. Too soft, too prissy. His bleary gaze landed on Rebecca. Bet she runs home crying first snowfall. Before Wyatt could respond, Rebecca stepped forward. Mr. Jenkins, is it? I understand your concern. Change can be unsettling, particularly when one has grown comfortable with disappointment. Her voice was clear and carried to the onlookers. But I assure you, I have no intention of leaving before my work here is complete. Frank blinked at her, momentarily thrown by her direct address. That's what they all say, he muttered, but with less conviction. I say it as well, Wyatt stated firmly, placing a hand on Frank's shoulder to turn him away from the gathering. She'll last as long as I do. Now come on, I'm walking you home before you say something you'll regret when sober. As Wyatt led the man away, the crowd dispersed, the music hesitantly resuming. Rebecca found herself surrounded by women offering reassurances. Pay no mind to Frank Jenkins, Martha Cooper said. His own daughter ran off to California last year, and he's been bitter about educated women ever since. Mrs. Wilson nodded. And don't worry about any betting pool. The last 3 teachers left because they couldn't handle the children, not the town. She gave Rebecca an assessing look. You've got more spine than the lot of them combined. Rebecca appreciated their support but felt shaken nonetheless. The incident had highlighted how precarious her position was, how many were expecting her to fail before she'd even begun. The social continued, but with subdued energy. Rebecca stayed another half hour, making conversation and trying to appear unaffected before excusing herself. As she walked back to the hotel in the gathering darkness, she heard footsteps behind her. Mind some company? Wyatt asked, falling into step beside her. Never a good idea for anyone to walk alone after dark, even in a relatively peaceful town. I would appreciate it, thank you, she replied, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders against the evening chill. Is Mr. Jenkins safely home? He is. And properly chastised by his wife, which is a far more effective punishment than anything I could devise. Wyatt's mouth quirked in a half-smile. I apologize for his behavior. Frank's not a bad man, just unhappy and too fond of whiskey. It's not your apology to make, Rebecca said. But I appreciate the sentiment. She hesitated. Is there truly a betting pool on how long I'll last? Wyatt sighed. People wager on everything in a small town when the first snow will fall, how many calves a prize cow will birth, whether Preacher Evans' sermons will run over an hour. He glanced at her. But yes, there's a pool about you, and for what it's worth, I put $20 on permanent resident. Despite herself, Rebecca laughed. That's quite a vote of confidence, Marshal. Just good business sense, he replied lightly. I recognize a sound investment when I see one. They had reached the hotel. Rebecca turned to face him on the bottom step, which brought their heights nearly equal. Thank you for the escort and for the dance earlier. My pleasure, he said sincerely. In the lamplight from the hotel windows, his face seemed younger, the usual watchfulness momentarily absent. You handled Frank Jenkins admirably, by the way. Most newcomers would have been intimidated. I've found that showing fear rarely improves difficult situations, Rebecca replied. My father taught me that, wise man, he was, she smiled at the memory. Good night, Wyatt. Good night, Rebecca. As she reached the hotel door, he called after her softly, for what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. Silverdale needs someone like you. Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and turned away, his tall figure soon disappearing into the darkness. Inside her room, Rebecca sat at the small writing desk and opened her journal. She had begun keeping a record of her journey west and now found herself describing the social Frank Jenkins disruption and her dance with the town marshal. As she wrote about Wyatt, her pen hesitated. There was something compelling about him, his quiet confidence, his evident care for the town, the sorrow he carried beneath his strength. For the first time since arriving in Silverdale, Rebecca wondered if she might find more than just purpose in this frontier town. Perhaps she might also find connection. With that unsettling thought, she closed her journal and prepared for bed. Tomorrow was Sunday, and Monday would bring her first day of teaching. Whatever personal reflections she was having would need to wait. She had 26 children counting on her, and she would not let them down. Monday morning arrived with a breathtaking sunrise that painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Rebecca had risen early, too nervous and excited to sleep longer. She dressed with care in a practical gray skirt and white blouse, her hair neatly pinned back. After a quick breakfast, she hurried to the schoolhouse, wanting ample time to prepare before her students arrived. The church bell struck 8 as Rebecca rang the school bell, its clear tone carrying across the town. She stood in the doorway, watching as children began appearing, some alone, some with siblings, a few accompanied by parents. They approached with varying degrees of enthusiasm and wariness. Sarah Wilkins was among the first to arrive, practically skipping up the steps, her slate clutched proudly in her hands. "Good morning, Miss Greenfield. I practiced my S all weekend." "Good morning, Sarah. I'm delighted to hear that," Rebecca smiled, gesturing for her to enter. "Choose any desk you like." The Wilkins girl beamed, selecting a seat near the front. Others followed, boys in clean but worn clothes, girls with hair neatly braided, teenagers trying to appear disinterested despite their curiosity. By 8:15, 21 students had arrived. "Good morning, class," Rebecca began, standing before them with outward confidence despite her racing heart. "I am Miss Greenfield, your new teacher. I've come a long way to be here because I believe education is the greatest gift one person can give another." She moved to the blackboard, writing her name in clear script. "In this room, we will learn reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography, and natural sciences. But more importantly, we will learn how to think, how to question, discover, and understand the world around us." Rebecca looked at their faces, some skeptical, others curious, a few already engaged. "Now, let's begin by learning about each other. When I call your name from the register, please stand and tell us something about yourself." The morning proceeded smoothly, with Rebecca assessing her students' abilities through simple exercises. She discovered that while some of the older children read quite well, others, including several teenagers, could barely recognize the alphabet. Rather than embarrassing them, she organized the class into groups based on skill rather than age, assigning peer tutors to help the less advanced students. By lunchtime, Rebecca had established clear expectations and begun forming connections with each child. When she dismissed them for the midday meal, several lingered to ask questions or show her their work. "That went rather well," came a voice from the doorway after the last child had departed. Wyatt leaned against the frame, hat in hand. He wore his marshal's badge over a blue shirt today, a gun belt around his hips. "I believe it did," Rebecca agreed, surprising herself with how pleased she was to see him. "Though it's only the first day." "First days matter," he said, stepping inside, "sets the tone." He glanced around the room, noting the new curtains she had hung and the maps she had pinned to the walls. "Place looks better already. Thank you, I'm trying to make it welcoming." She gathered papers from her desk, suddenly conscious of strands of hair that had come loose during the morning's activities. "What brings you by, Marshal? Official business? Just checking in. Mayor asked me to make sure everything was going smoothly." He studied her face. "You look like you belong here behind that teacher's desk. Natural fit." The compliment warmed her unexpectedly. "I hope so. There's so much to do. Some of the older children can barely read, while others need advanced instruction. You'll manage it," he said with certainty. "Listen, a few of us are having dinner at the hotel tonight. Doc Cooper and his wife, Mr. Holloway, Sheriff Tate from the county seat who's passing through. Mrs. Wilson suggested you might join us, get to know some of the town leaders." "I'd be delighted," Rebecca said, genuinely pleased at the invitation. "What time?" 6 o'clock. He shifted his weight, seeming almost uncertain for a moment. "I should get back to my rounds, just wanted to see how your first morning went." "I appreciate that," she said sincerely. After he left, Rebecca sat at her desk, a smile playing at her lips. Wyatt Blackburn was turning out to be quite different from her initial expectations of a frontier lawman. His evident interest in the school and her success was both professionally helpful and personally gratifying. The afternoon session went as well as the morning. Rebecca had the children read aloud from the limited textbooks, taking notes on each student's strengths and weaknesses. By dismissal time, she had a clear plan for the week ahead and had earned at least the tentative respect of most of her pupils. That evening, Rebecca changed into a forest green dress for dinner, taking extra care with her appearance. The small dining room of the Silver Dollar had been arranged for a private party, with the table set with the hotel's best china. Martha Cooper greeted her warmly, introducing her husband, Dr. Andrew Cooper, a serious man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. Sheriff Tate was a burly man with an impressive mustache who spoke loudly and laughed often. Mr. Holloway completed the party along with Wyatt, who pulled out Rebecca's chair for her. The conversation flowed easily through the excellent meal Mrs. Wilson provided. Rebecca found herself sharing stories of Boston and her journey west, while learning more about Silverdale's history and challenges. "The railroad's the key to our future," Sheriff Tate declared over dessert. "They're surveying routes now. If the line comes through Silverdale instead of Preston Junction, this town will double in size within 5 years. And bring its share of troubles along with prosperity," Dr. Cooper noted. "Every boom town attracts those looking to exploit opportunity through less than honest means. That's why we need to establish stronger foundations now," Mr. Holloway said, nodding toward Rebecca. "Education, law and order, medical care, community bonds, these things will determine whether we grow in the right ways." "Speaking of education," Martha interjected, "the boys came home quite impressed today, Miss Greenfield." "Thomas actually mentioned learning something, which I assure you is high praise indeed." Rebecca smiled. "They're both bright children. Thomas has a natural curiosity that will serve him well if properly directed. You see potential in all of them, don't you?" Wyatt asked, his blue eyes studying her intently. "I do," she admitted. "Even the most reluctant learners have capabilities waiting to be discovered." After dinner, as the party broke up, Wyatt offered to walk Rebecca to her room, though it was merely upstairs. In the hotel's narrow hallway, they paused. "Thank you for including me tonight," she said. "It was enlightening to hear different perspectives on the town's future." "They liked you," Wyatt observed. "Especially Sheriff Tate, though his wife would box his ears if she caught him looking at you that way." Rebecca laughed softly. "I didn't notice." "No, you wouldn't." Wyatt's expression grew more serious. "You see the best in people, don't you? It's rare out here, where most folks learn to look for trouble before it finds them." "Perhaps I'm simply optimistic," she suggested. "No," he shook his head slowly. "It's more than that. It's a kind of courage choosing to believe in possibilities rather than limitations." The hallway suddenly seemed too narrow, the air between them charged with unspoken thoughts. Rebecca became acutely aware of his presence, the clean scent of soap, the way his shirt stretched across broad shoulders, the gentle strength in his hands as they rested at his sides. "Well," she said, breaking the moment, "I should prepare for tomorrow. 26 young minds expecting enlightenment is a daunting prospect." Wyatt stepped back, giving her space. "Of course. Good night, Rebecca." "Good night, Wyatt." Inside her room, Rebecca pressed a hand to her flushed cheek, unsettled by her reaction to the marshal. It was too soon, too complicated. She had come to Silverdale to teach, to build a new life centered on her career, not to develop feelings for the first kind man she encountered. Yet she couldn't deny the flutter in her stomach when he looked at her with those perceptive blue eyes, or the warmth she felt in his presence. Pushing these thoughts aside, she focused on reviewing her lesson plans, making adjustments based on what she had learned about her students that day. This was what mattered: her work, her purpose. Everything else was a distraction she couldn't afford if she wanted to prove the doubters wrong. The weeks that followed fell into a steady rhythm. Rebecca rose early each morning, taught her increasingly engaged students, and spent evenings preparing lessons or participating in community activities. She joined the church's Ladies' Aid Society, attended town council meetings as an observer, and gradually became a familiar figure in Silverdale. Her relationship with Wyatt evolved into a comfortable friendship. He often stopped by the schoolhouse, sometimes bringing donated books he'd solicited from traveling salesmen or items she needed from the general store. They frequently found themselves in conversation after town meetings or church services, discussing everything from literature to local politics. One bright October afternoon, nearly 2 months after her arrival, Rebecca was supervising the children during their lunch break when Wyatt rode up on his chestnut stallion. The students, now comfortable with their teacher, called greetings to the marshal, several boys rushing to admire his horse. Miss Greenfield, he said, dismounting with his usual fluid grace, got something that might interest you. From his saddlebag, he produced a small package wrapped in brown paper. Came in on today's stage. Rebecca accepted it curiously. What is it? Open it and see, he suggested with a smile. Unwrapping the package, Rebecca found 3 slim volumes of children's stories, beautifully illustrated and in excellent condition. These are wonderful, she exclaimed. Where did you find them? Wrote to my sister in Denver, Wyatt explained. She's married to a bookstore owner, asked if they had anything suitable for a frontier school. Touched by his thoughtfulness, Rebecca impulsively squeezed his arm. Thank you, Wyatt. The children will be thrilled. His eyes warmed at her reaction. There's more coming. Sarah's particularly been asking for stories about horses, so Emily's sending some next month. You remembered that? Rebecca was surprised. Sarah had mentioned her interest in horses during a lesson weeks ago when Wyatt had been visiting the school. He shrugged. I listen when people talk about what matters to them. The simple statement held depths of meaning that made Rebecca's heart beat faster. Before she could respond, the church bell rang 1 o'clock, signaling the end of lunch. Back to class, everyone. She called to her students, who groaned good-naturedly but began gathering their things. To Wyatt, she added, Will you stay for the afternoon reading? I thought I'd start one of these new books today. Wish I could, he said regretfully, but I've got to ride out to the Hanson place. Dispute over water rights needs settling before it turns ugly. As he mounted his horse, he hesitated. Rebecca, the Harvest Festival is this Saturday. I know you'll be attending with the school display, but would you consider attending the evening dance with me as my guest? The invitation was different from their casual encounters, more deliberate, with clearer intention. Rebecca found herself nodding before she had fully considered the implications. I'd like that very much. His smile was reward enough. I'll come by the hotel at 7 then. With a tip of his hat to the watching students, he rode away. Rebecca turned to find several of the older girls exchanging meaningful glances. Inside, ladies, she said firmly, though she couldn't quite suppress her own smile. We have geography to learn this afternoon. The Harvest Festival was Silverdale's largest celebration of the year. The entire town gathered to display the fruits of their labor, farmers with their crops, ranchers with livestock, craftspeople with their wares. There were contests for the largest pumpkin, the best pie, the finest needlework. The schoolchildren had prepared displays showing their learning, with maps they had drawn and stories they had written. Rebecca spent the day moving between the school's booth and various activities, proud of her students' work and enjoying the community atmosphere. Sarah Wilkins had written a story about a wild horse that was being particularly admired, her reading skills having advanced remarkably in 2 months. By late afternoon, Rebecca returned to the hotel to rest and change for the evening festivities. She had brought one truly fine dress from Boston, a deep burgundy silk with modest lace trim that she had originally purchased for literary society events. It was more formal than Silverdale's usual attire, but the Harvest Festival dance was the town's most important social occasion. Mrs. Wilson helped with her hair, arranging it in an elegant style with soft curls framing her face. Marshall won't know what hit him, the older woman commented with unusual warmth. Mrs. Wilson, Rebecca protested, blushing, it's merely a social engagement. The hotel proprietress raised a skeptical eyebrow. I've known Wyatt Blackburn 5 years, never once seen him invite a woman to a dance as his guest. Social engagement, indeed. Rebecca had no response to that. In truth, her feelings for Wyatt had grown deeper with each passing week. His quiet strength, his unwavering support of her work, his kindness to the townspeople, and the glimpses of vulnerability he occasionally revealed had combined to create an attraction she could no longer deny to herself. But she remained uncertain of his feelings. Was his interest in her personal or merely an extension of his role as town marshal looking after a newcomer? The loss of his wife years ago had clearly left deep wounds. Was he ready to open his heart again, or was she misreading his attention? At precisely 7 o'clock, a knock came at her door. Rebecca opened it to find Wyatt standing in the hallway, dressed in a dark suit she had never seen him wear before. His usually tousled hair was neatly combed, and he held a small bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers. For a moment, he simply stared at her, his expression one of genuine appreciation. "Rebecca," he finally said, "you look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy under his admiring gaze. "You look quite handsome yourself, Marshal." He handed her the flowers with a slightly self-conscious gesture. "Not much, I'm afraid. Flowers are harder to come by in October." "They're perfect," she assured him, burying her nose in the fragrant blossoms. "Let me put these in water and I'll be ready." The town hall had been transformed for the evening, with lanterns hanging from the ceiling, autumn decorations adorning the walls, and tables laden with refreshments along one side. A small band played lively tunes while couples already filled the dance floor. As they entered, Rebecca was conscious of the glances cast their way, some curious, some approving, a few speculative. Word of her official escort by the marshal had clearly spread through Silverdale's efficient gossip network. "Ignore them," Wyatt murmured close to her ear as he guided her through the crowd with a hand at the small of her back. "Small town, not much entertainment besides talking about their neighbors." "I don't mind," Rebecca assured him. "After 2 months, I'm getting used to being a topic of conversation." They greeted friends and acquaintances, accepting congratulations on the school display and commenting on the day's contest winners. Martha Cooper gave Rebecca a knowing wink when Wyatt wasn't looking, while Dr. Cooper engaged him in conversation about the upcoming town council election. When the band started a waltz, Wyatt turned to Rebecca with an outstretched hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Greenfield?" As they moved together across the floor, Rebecca was acutely aware of his hand at her waist, the subtle scent of his shaving soap, and the way his eyes rarely left her face. They fit together well, his height complementing hers, their steps naturally synchronized. "You're miles away," he observed after a while. "Something troubling you?" Rebecca shook her head. "Not troubled, just reflecting. When I arrived in Silverdale, I wasn't sure I'd find my place here. Now it feels as if I've always belonged." His expression softened. "You have made quite an impact in a short time. The school board can't stop singing your praises. Even Frank Jenkins admitted last week that you're doing right by the young uns." "High praise indeed," she laughed, the highest coming from Frank. Wyatt guided her through a turn. "Truth is, you've brought something to Silverdale we didn't know we were missing. A kind of hope, I suppose, belief in possibilities." The music ended, but neither moved immediately to separate. Around them, other couples dispersed, heading for refreshments or chairs along the wall. Still they stood, caught in a moment that seemed separate from the bustling room. "Rebecca," Wyatt began, his voice lower than usual, "I've been wanting to tell you." He was interrupted by Mr. Holloway approaching with obvious urgency. "Marshal, sorry to disturb you, but there's trouble outside. Some cowboys from the Circle B got into it with the miners from up Crescent Canyon Way." Wyatt's expression shifted instantly to professional concern. "Excuse me, Rebecca, I need to handle this." "Of course," she said, hiding her disappointment. As Wyatt followed Mr. Holloway out, Rebecca made her way to where Martha Cooper sat with several other women from the Ladies' Aid Society. They welcomed her warmly, making room on the bench. "The marshal certainly cuts a fine figure in that suit," observed Mrs. Peterson, a plump woman with twinkling eyes. "Haven't seen him wear it since Judge Wilson's wedding last year. He and the schoolteacher make a handsome couple," added Mrs. Taylor, fanning herself vigorously despite the cool evening. "Don't you think so, Martha?" Martha Cooper smiled kindly at Rebecca. "I think our Miss Greenfield has brought out a side of Wyatt Blackburn many of us thought was gone forever, and that's a blessing regardless of what may or may not develop between them." Rebecca felt her cheeks warm. "You're all getting ahead of yourselves." "The marshal and I are friends, nothing more." "Honey," Mrs. Peterson said gently, "that man hasn't looked at anyone the way he looks at you since Catherine died. Some of us were beginning to worry he'd never open his heart again." Before Rebecca could formulate a response, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. Wyatt re-entered, his expression grave as he conferred with Sheriff Tate, who had arrived for the festival. They were joined by several other men, including Dr. Cooper, their conversation appearing increasingly serious. Martha frowned. Something's wrong. Andrew doesn't look concerned over a simple brawl. Rebecca watched as Wyatt glanced in her direction, then made his way through the crowd toward her. His formal demeanor had returned, all traces of the relaxed dancing partner gone. "Rebecca," he said quietly, "I need to speak with you privately." Alarmed by his tone, she followed him to a quiet corner of the hall. "What's happened? Is someone hurt?" "Not yet," he replied grimly. "But there's trouble brewing. A band of outlaws has been spotted heading this way, the Craven Gang. They've robbed 3 banks in the territory this month, shot 2 lawmen. Sheriff Tate believes they may be planning to hit Silverdale tomorrow when the festival bank deposits are made." Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth. "How terrible! What can be done?" "Sheriff's organizing a defense. I need to help him." Wyatt's blue eyes held regret and determination. "I'm sorry about our evening. I'll have Mrs. Wilson escort you back to the hotel." "I understand," Rebecca assured him, though disappointment coursed through her. "Your duty comes first." He hesitated, then reached for her hand, holding it between both of his. "Rebecca, what I was trying to say earlier." He paused, seeming to struggle with words. "These past 2 months, you've brought something back to life in me that I thought was gone forever. I need you to know that in case." "Don't," she interrupted, suddenly frightened by his tone. "Don't speak as if you might not return." His fingers tightened around hers. "I've faced men like the Cravens before. They don't value life, their own or others. But I promise you this, I will do everything in my power to keep this town, to keep you safe." Before she could respond, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a brief, tender kiss that stole her breath. Then he was gone, striding purposefully toward the exit where Sheriff Tate waited. Rebecca stood frozen, her fingertips touching her lips where the warmth of his kiss lingered. Around her, the festival continued, though with subdued energy as word of the potential danger spread. Martha Cooper appeared at her side, taking her arm gently. "Come, dear. Andrew insists I take you and the other women back to the hotel. The men are organizing a town defense." In a daze, Rebecca allowed herself to be led outside, her mind still reeling from Wyatt's kiss and the sudden threat to Silverdale's safety. As they walked through the darkened streets, she could see men gathering weapons, moving to strategic positions throughout the town. The festive atmosphere had vanished, replaced by grim determination. The hotel lobby had been transformed into a command center of sorts, with Mr. Holloway organizing the older men and those without fighting experience. Women were preparing bandages, checking supplies, and setting up cots in case of injuries. "Rebecca," Mrs. Wilson called, "could you help organize the medical supplies? Dr. Cooper says your teaching experience means you're good at creating order from chaos." Grateful for purpose, Rebecca threw herself into the work, sorting bandages, medicines, and equipment according to the doctor's instructions. The activity helped distract her from worry, though her thoughts repeatedly returned to Wyatt, his face as he'd kissed her, the fear she'd glimpsed beneath his professional composure. The night passed slowly, tension building as dawn approached. Sheriff Tate's information suggested the Craven Gang might attack early morning, when they believed the town would still be sleeping off festival celebrations. Around 5 in the morning, with gray light just beginning to seep into the sky, the first shots rang out from the north end of town. Rebecca jumped at the sound, nearly dropping the stack of clean towels she was carrying to the makeshift infirmary. "It's starting," Dr. Cooper said grimly, checking his medical bag. "Ladies, be ready but stay inside. Martha, you'll assist me if there are wounded." The gunfire intensified, punctuated by shouts and the sound of galloping horses. From the hotel windows, Rebecca could see little besides occasional muzzle flashes in the pre-dawn darkness. The waiting was unbearable, each moment stretching into eternity as she imagined Wyatt in the midst of the violence. An hour passed, the gunfire gradually diminishing until silence fell over Silverdale. The silence was somehow worse than the noise had been, heavy with unknown outcomes. Finally, the hotel door burst open and 2 men carried in a third between them. Blood soaked the wounded man's shirt, his face ashen with pain. "Clear a table," Dr. Cooper commanded, rushing forward. Rebecca recognized the injured man as one of the ranch hands from the Circle B. More men followed, some walking wounded, others carried. Martha and the other women sprang into action, helping Dr. Cooper tend to the injuries. Rebecca worked steadily, following Martha's instructions, washing wounds, holding bandages, offering water to the injured. She tried not to think about who hadn't yet returned, focusing instead on each task before her. "Miss Greenfield," a young voice called from the doorway. She turned to find Thomas Cooper, Martha's 12-year-old son, his face streaked with dirt but his eyes excited. "Marshal Blackburn sent me to tell everyone the Cravens are defeated, 3 dead, 2 captured, 1 escaped, but Sheriff Tate's men are tracking him." "And our people?" Rebecca asked, her heart in her throat. "The Marshal got shot in the arm, but he said it's just a scratch. He's helping bring in the last of the wounded." Thomas's chest swelled with importance. "He let me carry messages because I'm fast and know all the shortcuts." Relief flooded through Rebecca so powerfully that she had to steady herself against a table. "Thank you, Thomas. That's excellent reporting." The next hours passed in a blur of activity as more wounded arrived and were treated. Dr. Cooper worked tirelessly, stitching wounds, setting broken bones, and extracting bullets. The injuries were numerous, but miraculously, none appeared life-threatening. It was nearly noon when Wyatt finally appeared in the doorway of the hotel. His left arm was bandaged, blood had dried on his once pristine white shirt, and exhaustion lined his face. But he was upright and alive, his blue eyes immediately searching the room until they found Rebecca. She was at his side in an instant, propriety forgotten. "You're hurt," she said, gently touching his bandaged arm. "It's nothing," he assured her, his voice rough with fatigue. "Bullet just grazed me. Doc's deputy already patched it up." His good arm came around her shoulders in a brief, fierce embrace. "The town's secure. The Cravens won't be troubling anyone again." "Come sit down," Rebecca urged, leading him to a chair. "You need rest." He sank into the seat gratefully but kept hold of her hand. "I kept thinking of you," he admitted quietly. "During the fight, kept thinking I had to make it back because we hadn't finished our conversation." Rebecca knelt beside his chair, heedless of her crumpled, blood-stained dress or the people moving around them. "I was so afraid," she whispered. "When the shooting started, all I could think was that I might lose you before I had the chance to tell you." "Tell me what?" he prompted when she hesitated. She met his gaze directly, summoning her courage. "That I love you, Wyatt Blackburn. That I think I've been falling in love with you since that first day when you told everyone I would last as long as you did." A slow smile spread across his tired face, transforming it. "I meant those words, you know. Back then I was just defending a newcomer I believed in, but now." He squeezed her hand. "Now I can't imagine my life without you in it." "Marshal," Sheriff Tate called from across the room, "need you for the prisoner transport." Wyatt sighed, reluctance evident in every line of his body. "Duty calls, but this conversation isn't over, Rebecca Greenfield." "Not by a long shot." As he rose to leave, he bent and kissed her forehead, a promise in the gentle touch. "Wait for me." "As long as necessary," she assured him. The aftermath of the Craven gang attack occupied Silverdale for days. The dead were buried, the wounded healed, and the 2 captured outlaws transported to the territorial capital for trial. The town gradually returned to its normal rhythms, though with a new sense of unity forged in their shared defense. School resumed the following week, with Rebecca's students full of excitement and exaggerated stories about the battle. She channeled their energy into writing compositions about heroism and community, creating a special lesson about separating facts from rumors. Wyatt had been busy with official duties, helping Sheriff Tate complete reports and testifying before the circuit judge who had arrived to hold preliminary hearings. They had seen each other only briefly, with no opportunity for the private conversation they both desired. On Friday afternoon, as Rebecca was tidying the schoolhouse after dismissal, a knock sounded at the open door. She turned to find Wyatt leaning against the frame, his arm still bandaged but his color much improved. "Marshal," she greeted him, her heart quickening at the sight of him. "How's the arm?" "Healing well," he replied, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. "Doctor says I'll have full use of it again in a couple weeks." He approached slowly, stopping a respectable distance away. "I've missed you, and I you," Rebecca admitted. "You've been busy." "Too busy." He moved closer, close enough that she could see the various shades of blue in his eyes. "But that's finished now. Judge Travis is satisfied with our reports and Sheriff Tate has returned to the county seat. So you're free this evening?" Rebecca asked hopefully. "I am." His gaze held hers steadily. "I thought perhaps we could have dinner, just the two of us. Mrs. Wilson has offered the use of her private parlor. I'd like that very much." His smile was warm. 7 o'clock, I'll be ready." After he left, Rebecca pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks, excitement and nervous anticipation coursing through her. The interrupted conversation from the Harvest Festival dance would finally be completed. Tonight. She spent extra time preparing for their dinner, selecting her second-best dress, a deep blue that complemented her eyes, and arranging her hair in a softer style than her usual teaching coiffure. Mrs. Wilson, who had become something of a conspirator in the developing romance, offered the loan of a small pearl pendant which brings luck in matters of the heart. The private parlor had been transformed for the evening, with a small table set for two, candles providing warm illumination, and a vase of late-blooming flowers as centerpiece. Wyatt was waiting when Rebecca arrived, standing near the fireplace in a clean shirt and vest, his injured arm now in a less cumbersome sling. "You look beautiful," he said simply, coming forward to take her hand. "Thank you." She smiled up at him. "You're looking much better yourself." Dinner was a quiet affair, with Mrs. Wilson's niece serving excellently prepared food before discreetly withdrawing. Their conversation flowed easily, touching on town matters, school progress, and books they had both enjoyed. Yet beneath the comfortable exchange ran a current of anticipation, of unspoken feelings waiting to be acknowledged. After dessert, Wyatt suggested they sit by the fire. As they settled into two chairs drawn close together, he reached for her hand. "Rebecca," he began, his voice low and serious, "before we were interrupted at the dance, I was trying to tell you something important." He took a deep breath. "After Catherine died, I thought that part of my life was over. I focused on my work, on building a life centered around duty rather than personal happiness." His fingers tightened around hers. "Then you arrived in Silverdale with your books and your belief in possibilities and your unwavering determination. And something inside me that had been dormant for years began to awaken." Rebecca's heart raced at his words, but she remained silent, giving him the space to continue. "I fought it at first," he admitted, "felt disloyal to Catherine's memory. Convinced myself I was just being protective of a newcomer who needed guidance." A rueful smile touched his lips. "But the truth kept getting harder to deny. Every time I saw you teaching those children, standing up to town skeptics, building a place for yourself here, I fell a little deeper." He shifted in his chair to face her more directly. "I love you, Rebecca Greenfield. I think I started falling in love with you that first day when you stood on Main Street looking both terrified and determined to conquer the world. And if you'll have me, I want to build a life with you not just as Silverdale's marshal and schoolteacher, but as husband and wife." Tears of joy sprang to Rebecca's eyes. "Oh, Wyatt," she whispered, "I love you too, so very much." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a delicate gold ring with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "This was my grandmother's," he explained. "My sister sent it when I wrote asking for it last month." "Last month?" Rebecca asked, surprised. "You've been planning this for weeks." "Since the day you organized the school picnic and handled that rattlesnake scare without batting an eye," he confessed with a smile. "That's when I knew for certain you weren't just passing through my life." He held up the ring. "Rebecca Greenfield, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "With all my heart, yes." Wyatt slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms for a kiss that spoke of promise, passion, and a future brighter than either had dared imagine just months before. Their wedding took place on a crisp December morning, with snow dusting the ground and evergreen boughs decorating the church. The entire town turned out for the occasion, filling the small building to capacity. Sarah Wilkins served as flower girl, proudly scattering rose petals saved and dried from the last autumn blooms. Martha Cooper stood as Rebecca's matron of honor, while Sheriff Tate returned to Silverdale to stand up with Wyatt. Rebecca wore a gown of ivory silk that Mrs. Wilson and the Ladies' Aid Society had secretly altered from one of the hotel proprietress's treasured possessions, her own wedding dress from years ago. "It brought me happiness," the older woman had insisted when presenting it to Rebecca. "Now it should bring you the same." Wyatt, resplendent in a new suit ordered from Denver, watched with undisguised adoration as Rebecca walked down the aisle on Mr. Holloway's arm, the older man having offered to give her away in her father's absence. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, spoken in clear voices that carried to every corner of the church. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Wyatt's kiss was tender yet passionate enough to elicit cheers from the congregation and a few good-natured whistles from the cowboys in attendance. The reception at the town hall lasted well into the evening, with dancing, feasting, and abundant well wishes from a community that had embraced them both. Even Frank Jenkins approached to offer congratulations, now completely reformed in his opinion of the schoolteacher's durability. "Reckon you proved us all wrong, Mrs. Blackburn," he said gruffly. "Glad of it too. Best teacher these young'uns ever had." As the celebration continued around them, Wyatt drew Rebecca into a quiet corner for a moment alone. "Happy, Mrs. Blackburn?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Completely," she assured him, reaching up to touch his cheek, "though I admit I'll have to get used to the new name." "Rebecca Blackburn," he said, testing it. "Sounds right to me." "It does, doesn't it?" She smiled up at him. "I was thinking, the school term ends next week for winter break. Perhaps we could visit your sister in Denver for our honeymoon. I'd like to thank her in person for the books and the ring." "She'd love that," Wyatt agreed. "And I'd enjoy showing you the city. It's no Boston, but it has its charms." "Anywhere with you has all the charm I require," Rebecca assured him. His expression grew more serious. "You know, when I told those doubters that you'd last as long as I did, I never imagined just how true those words would become." His arms tightened around her. "I plan to last a very long time, Rebecca Blackburn." "As do I, Wyatt," she promised, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "As do I." Spring came early to Silverdale in 1879, bringing new growth, fresh opportunities, and significant changes for the Blackburns. Rebecca continued teaching, though now she returned each day to the modest house Wyatt had purchased at the edge of town. They had spent the winter making it a home, adding bookshelves for Rebecca's growing collection and furniture crafted by a local woodworker. The railroad survey had indeed favored Silverdale over Preston Junction, bringing an influx of new residents and businesses. The town council, with Wyatt as a leading voice, worked to ensure growth occurred in an orderly fashion, with provisions for expanded services including a larger school. In April, as wildflowers carpeted the surrounding hills, Rebecca shared life-changing news with her husband. "A baby," Wyatt repeated, his expression transforming from shock to wonder to pure joy in the space of seconds. "We're going to have a baby. In November, Doctor." "Cooper believes," Rebecca confirmed, her hands protectively cradling her still flat stomach. "Are you pleased?" In answer, Wyatt gathered her into his arms, his kiss communicating everything words could not. When he finally drew back, tears shimmered in his blue eyes. "I never thought I'd have this chance again," he whispered. "A family, a child to love." "I know," Rebecca said softly, understanding the complicated emotions this news brought. Joy for their future together mingled with memories of his past losses. That evening, they sat on their small porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson. Wyatt's arm was around Rebecca's shoulders, her head resting against him in comfortable intimacy. "I've been thinking," he said after a companionable silence. "With the baby coming and the town growing so quickly, perhaps it's time for a change." Rebecca looked up at him questioningly. "What kind of change?" Sheriff Tate has asked if I'd consider running for county sheriff next election. The current one's retiring, and Tate says I'm the obvious choice. Wyatt's expression was thoughtful. It would mean more responsibility, but also more regular hours, less chance of being called out in the middle of the night for every minor disturbance. "You'd be wonderful," Rebecca said sincerely. "The entire county would benefit from your leadership." "It would mean moving to the county seat eventually," he cautioned. "Leaving Silverdale, your school." Rebecca considered this. "The school will continue without me. I've been training Sarah Jenkins, Frank's niece, who's been helping after classes to take over when the baby comes anyway. She has a natural gift for teaching." She squeezed his hand. "Our home is wherever we're together, Wyatt. If this is an opportunity you want to pursue, I support it completely." His kiss was filled with gratitude. "Have I told you lately how much I love you, Rebecca Blackburn?" "You have," she replied with a smile, "but I never tire of hearing it." As darkness descended, they remained on the porch, planning their future together and marveling at how far they had come since that dusty day on Main Street when a Boston bookseller's daughter had stepped into a new world and a wounded lawman had found unexpected healing. "They said I wouldn't last," Rebecca murmured, nestling closer to her husband as the first stars appeared. "And I said you'd last as long as I do," Wyatt completed the thought, his hand gently caressing her shoulder. "Turns out we were both right. We'll last together for all the days to come." In November, as the first snow of winter dusted Silverdale, William Robert Blackburn entered the world with a robust cry and a full head of dark hair. His parents welcomed him with tears of joy and hearts overflowing with love, their family now complete. The following spring, with the election successfully behind them, the Blackburn family moved to Cedar Ridge, the county seat, where Sheriff Wyatt Blackburn took up his new duties, and Rebecca established a small private school that quickly gained a reputation for excellence. William Billy, to his adoring parents, grew into a curious, adventurous boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. Years passed, the century turned, and the Wild West gradually transformed into something tamer, more settled. Through it all, Wyatt and Rebecca Blackburn remained steadfast in their love for each other, their commitment to their community, and their belief in possibilities. And whenever newcomers arrived in Cedar Ridge, uncertain of their place or ability to adapt to frontier life, the aging but still sharp Sheriff Blackburn would smile at his silver-haired schoolteacher wife and declare with absolute certainty, "They'll last as long as we do." Which, as it turned out, was a very long time indeed.